kids got supposed to start a run. We had the dump truck. Nice day. Yeah, 55 Chevy.
The reason I wasn't here last month was because I met out in Las Vegas. We did I'd never been in a helicopter out of the Bay. And the next day we did a couple green shoes from the job things to drive. So I chose the C8 Ferrari.
Would you like better?
I mean, I love that. I've always been a vet. I like it, but Ferrari, I had to learn that you wind it up higher. And then the next day, we was Coast Sky Combat. We went in these little planes, and I was trying to shoot him down. He was trying to shoot me down.
Does your cousin live out there? Does your cousin live in
No, he's in Atlanta. But we do river rafting, and we've done plane flying and all that sort of stuff in the past.
there? We still need Jacob. We still need Jacob here.
Jacob's right now.
Okay.
Sir.
But yeah,
Hello, Jacob.
street. 2 weeks for
Hello, Jacob.
18 months.
Waiting for my wife to come when she did. Oh, yeah, that's
CT.
my wife with me. First meeting she's been to.
Oh, really?
Of any kind.
Pretty quick that way. This thing was about a mile and a quarter track. It was at the Las Vegas Speedway road. And it's level. It's not a seaway or anything like that. But it's, you can get that thing out over 100 straight. It's not, it's 1,500, 2,000 straight. That'd be a trip. Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Call to order the June 6th Putnam County Planning Commission special meeting. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have a roll call, please.
Jason Asbury.
Here.
Heather Davis.
Here.
Edie Davis. Jim Dockrell.
Here.
Brian Ellis.
Here.
Jessica Griffin. Dave Hoppa. Brian Holman.
Here.
Dick Mays.
Here.
David Mills. Jacob Pack.
Here.
Ronald Pauling. Steve Perry.
Here.
Travis Willard. Lynn Yeager.
Here.
All right, thank you. You guys have the April 18th meeting minutes in front of you. If there's no change, I'll take a motion to approve.
Motion.
I have a motion for Mr. Yeager. Have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, next part of our agenda tonight is the citizens' concerns. This is a part of our agenda for anybody that is here as a citizen of Putnam County that would like to bring something to the attention of the board that's not going to be covered on our agenda later this evening. So. You can come up here, state your name and address, please.
Scott Smith, 61 Banjo Lane, Scott Depot, 25560. So I need to stand here, can I?
If you want to stand up here, you
Okay.
can.
I just had notes. in my-
Yeah, that's fine. As long as you use the mic, so it's all being recorded, that's fine.
I use my old man glasses too. I appreciate y'all letting us come and speak tonight. Again, my name is Scott Smith. This is my lovely wife Tamara, my much better half over here. So we've had a little issue going on. You've probably heard our name a lot lately, and we apologize for that if you have, because we've asked a lot of questions of a lot of people trying to figure out some things going on. I want to give you just a little history. My wife and I both, our whole life, had a dream of owning a farm and having a farm. We never could make that happen until a few years ago. We looked for property for several years. We wanted to be in Putnam County, didn't think we could afford it. We looked in Kanawha County, Cabell County, Mason, we looked everywhere. We got some land. We now have a 160-acre farm on Scary Creek. That was not a farm when we bought it. We had to make it a farm. It's a really cool story how we got that, which I won't go into that for everybody's time, but I'd love to tell you that sometime. It's a great story of the goodness of God, how we got that land. But anyway, we bought this property. We only had a few farmable acres on it. We originally bought some goats to clear. We started making hay. We clear cut 44 acres of the 160 acres to start getting fields and hay fields and pastures going. And there's a reason I'm kind of going through some of this history. I'll tie all this in. But when we did that, obviously we were disturbing a whole lot of dirt. So I went and sought out DEP and what we needed to do about that. I talked to a guy named Larry Board. Larry was at the time over all permitting for the whole state for the DEP. Since we were doing agriculture, a lot of stuff we were exempt from as far as some of the permitting requirements and engineering requirements, but Larry had me talk to the local enforcement agent, and we went through the best practices and what we should do, because you can still get fined. And we followed those best practices as far as silt control and everything we needed to do around the property as we were clearing. Next thing, when on the property, there was a garage on that property that had never been finished. It was block. It had trees growing out of it, covered in poison ivy vines, filled full of trash. So we wanted to finish that garage. Came and met with the planning commission, found out what we had to do to get that permitted, to get power done, and get that finished off, and we finished off the garage. As we got down the road, we got to clearing and planting and getting all our fields and everything going. We also have a bottom that lays down along the creek, and that bottom is very uneven and rough, and when it floods, it just is muddy, and we can't really farm it. So I wanted to level it. So again, I came up with the planning commission, found out what we had to do to get a permit for that. We had to hire an engineering company and go through all that because it's in the flood zone. Show that we weren't going to affect the floodplain any. I think that all had to go back through the Corps of Engineers, and we got a permit for that. So we can start leveling that field down there to make another hay field of about 2.5 acres along the creek. We got to the point, as my wife kept adding more and more animals to our zoo out there, that we needed a barn. So again, I came up with the planning commission with our plans. So what we had to do to build the barn, which we had to prove the barn was not in the flood zone. We got a septic permit. At the time, we were also going to build a house at the same time, which unfortunately hasn't happened yet. So we did a perk test for the house, perk test for the barn, got septic permit for the barn. I got a building permit for the barn and proceeded to build the barn. So we've kind of had a history of, we haven't been trying to skirt requirements or things we thought we had to do, and again, seek out when we felt we needed permits and try to do the right thing and what we felt we needed to do. Once we got the barn built, we kept adding more animals, but it's a beautiful barn. It's an animal barn, and I got some pictures. We can show you that. Mr. Asbury has been to the barn and asked Mr. Randolph if he would come because he's been to the barn. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we had some parties at our barn. My son is a captain in the Army. He was transferred to Korea, and we had a big going away party for him. Jeff Losh, who's the chief of police in Winfield, is a good friend of ours. We had a surprise 50th birthday party for Jeff in our barn. As we started, we just had a big get together once for a bunch of our friends, had a band, had a big party, and people kept saying, man, this place is beautiful. We'd love to have a party out here. I'd love to bring my granddaughter out here and have a birthday party. And, however, we got little mini horses. We got mini horses, mini donkeys, goats. We now have sheep, because my wife won't sell them to my neighbors because they might eat them. And we have full-size horses, so we have a lot of different kind of animals. So my wife's friend Tanya Losh came up with this idea, well, why don't we start renting out the barn and doing parties out here. And if you've ever farmed, you know it's hard to make money. We could actually just use the money to do some venues out there and rent the barn. If some girl wants to come and give us a few $100 for a birthday party, or some woman wants to get married next to smelly horse stalls and give us some money for that, we gladly take it. But so they started, came up with this idea. My wife runs her own business. We already had a farm business. We've been doing that for a while. So they came up with it. We talked to the state tax department what we had to do. We talked to our insurance agent what we had to do, got everything set up. And they started advertising on Facebook about doing venues. So we started getting a lot of interest in that. And then we got a letter from the planning commission that we were basically operating a venue without a permit. And we were kind of getting fined. It was $100 for even advertising without the right permit. We had to go hire an engineer, which is where I got Mr. Randolph involved, because we had to have this building inspected and permitted like it was a brand new commercial construction. So that's when we started and talked about water retention ponds and all the water flow off the property and right-of-ways. And I think there was even questions about, are we building bonfires, and are we doing hay rides? And I'm very familiar with the fires too. I got permits from Ian Smith, the local forestry. When we were clearing, you can imagine we had brush piles the size of houses we had to burn. Some of them burned for months. I had all my permits from Ian. We had round-the-clock fire watch and all the stuff we were supposed to do with that too. So we met with Aaron Randolph. He came out to the property with Stacy Call, his surveyor, and if I say anything wrong, he'll jump up and smack me and correct me, but they seemed a little confused on really what needed to be done and what they were looking for. And I think Aaron's one comment was, I'm doing more for sediment control and stuff than a lot of his commercial projects he goes out and looks at. So after that, of course, we'd already met with Mr. Call at the Planning Commission and tried to get some clarification. We kind of thought they were just concerned about the barn and what was going on right around the barn. So then after that, we got a letter that came from the Planning Commission to Aaron about everything that we needed to do. And there was a couple of things on there that were, oops, I pulled out the wrong one here, I'm sorry. Didn't want to get any of this wrong. So a couple things, we have a camper on our property. When we first bought the property, when we go down there and work on the weekends, we'd stay in our camper. Eventually we were able to buy a house that bordered the property where we live in now. We sold our house in Charleston and we live in the house. So the camper, we call it our guest house. If any of our kids come in from out of town, we make them stay in the camper. So on the email, one question is someone living in the RV with 3 question marks? And I really didn't understand what that has to do with anything about somebody living in the RV. We do have a family member that has some serious mental challenges, lives like a homeless person, and the place they were living a few months ago burned to the ground, and we tried to get them to come and live in the camper, but they wouldn't come. So if that person had been in the camper, I'm not sure what that has to do with anything going on the property or anything with the Planning Commission, but that was a question on there that we didn't quite understand. The next section that we were concerned about says, proposed venue barn is in the floodplain, therefore, with a bunch of questions and things we had to do about being in the floodplain. So again, if you go back to when we got the original building permit for this barn, we had to prove at that time it was not in the floodplain or we couldn't get the building permit. And I believe we had to prove that the septic tank also was not going to be in the floodplain. Then both of them were out of the floodplain, but I had to pay Mr. Randolph to come back out, and because he said, well, if you're in the floodplain, you know, we got a problem. So I paid them to come back out, shoot the elevation of the floor again, and show that we were not in the floodplain. You know, we've been asked to do a lot of stuff about right-of-ways, all the buildings on the property, which the buildings are goat sheds, donkey sheds, horse sheds, hay sheds, equipment sheds, wood storage sheds, and a barn and a camper. We are also building a high tunnel greenhouse, or high tunnel. A lot of people call it a greenhouse, but it's a high tunnel. You got a plant in the ground, it's got a cover over it, if you've ever seen those. This is we work on a lot of programs on the farm through the NRCS out of Point Pleasant. We've done pollinator programs and soil programs to get the soil better, improving the soil with liming. And they gave us a grant to build a high tunnel, which we're behind on, but we're building this high tunnel. So there was discussion about permitting about that, which high tunnels are exempt per state law from needing permitting, which I provided the Planning Commission a copy of that that regulation. So anyway, but all that was supposed to be laid out on this, which was going to cost us $4,400 of engineering time to get all this done. And we just seem a little bit confused about, 365 days a year, we're farming. If you don't think we're farming, you're welcome to come any weekend you want, and we got weed eaters and shovels and hoes, and you can come when we're baling hay and stack hay bales, you can muck stalls. I think you'll agree when by the time you leave, we are farming. The barn is not heated, the barn is not cooled. The barn does have a bathroom and a kitchen in it, which was originally there. We're not changing anything, we're not building anything. We're not changing anything other than if somebody comes for a party, my wife will probably go after me and make sure the grass is mowed. And the horse poo is all cleaned up. But, we can only do this probably May through October, just from the fact that the barn is not heated or cooled. So
Scott, what do you all do for restrooms? You just get ported?
we have a restroom in the barn. Originally, we built it, there's a restroom there, and we've had parties before with 30, 40 people. That was fine, but we'd already checked into the portable ones that you bring in like on a trailer if we had a larger venue. Now, we've also kind of determined ourselves, so this question has never been asked about capacity. We feel our capacity is about 50 to 75 people, and that also goes to parking. Parking, we can probably park 30 to 40 cars. We're basing that on previous events we had. I've got a hay field that's about 2 flat acres that I can park a lot more cars in if the hay's mowed. But I'm not mowing that field unless somebody pays me for the hay, because I need that hay more than I need those cars parked there. So, but that's kind of we feel our sweet spot based on other events we had. There's about 50 to 75 people and 30 to 40 cars that we have parking for. We've got a lay down area. There's a big area where when they logged, they made a big clearing where they loaded all the log trucks out. And we have a company that brings us mulch that we put on around the barn and on all the animal trails and stuff. And we've just leveled all that up, and it's just a big flat like mulch field that's also an area we use as a parking lot. There's parking up around the camper. There's some parking around the barn. So we have a few different places, but that's kind of what we've determined.
And
So the
you
bathroom-
are, I'm sorry, you are unzoned, unincorporated area.
We are in an unzoned, unincorporated area, and there's not one neighbor that can see anything we do from their house. Maybe one in the wintertime with the leaves off, but, and I've got, and they can pass these around. I have some pictures of everything.
You're giving us a whole lot of good information, but the way I see it, if you're in an unzoned, unincorporated area, I don't even know why we're having this conversation.
I think that's my question too for staff is, really, Mr. Smith is not building a new building. Mr. Smith is not even upgrading the stall. If there's a venue going on, it's a horse stall a couple hours before the venue, and it's going to be a horse stall when the venue's over. You may put the horses out to pasture, and that may be about all you do to have that venue in there. And again, you're unzoned, unincorporated, so I guess my question to maybe clear up some confusion for me is, why is Mr. Smith here?
This was complaint driven.
Okay,
We got the complaint that they were advertising the property for commercial use, which they didn't have the permit for commercial use.
But do they have to
but do they have
have a
to in
permit
an
in
unzoned, unincorporated area?
For commercial use, you do have to have a permit, absolutely, for the IOP. So that's where this stems from. They have a permit for an accessory use for the barn, which is fine. So we take, when somebody calls in with a complaint, we take it seriously, we research it. And until we have a vehicle that stays in a unique situation like this, we can treat it differently. Right now, the IOP stays in commercial
But
activity.
I guess my question though is,
Criteria for to be permitted.
and you guys please jump in if you have other comments. I don't see what Mr. Smith is doing as a commercial use. For 365 days, it's a farm. I live across the river, and if somebody wants to have a wedding in my backyard, I'm going to let them have a wedding in my backyard, and I'm not going to come here.
That's fine.
And I'll advertise it as you can have a wedding on the river.
It was being advertised as a commercial venue, no problem. And when I talked to them I've had great people, I've had great conversations with them. they've told me they've got a list of people waiting to make appointments to have these parties. And, I mean, that tells me, you know, it's a
Well, I
commercial.
don't know.
Yeah, it's up to you guys.
Hey, Dave, what's IOP? We're ding dongs down here. What's IOP?
I'll save my comments, go ahead.
Sorry.
IOP, what is
All
it?
improvement location permit ordinance.
IOP?
We've changed this.
And
We've made
and
tons
part
of
of
changes
this,
to this.
and
Apparently we need
again,
more.
I think Dave's just doing his job the way he thinks is best to do it. I'm not wanting this to be any kind of a personal thing, but I think it is an opportunity for the county to clarify some things. We understand there's a special permit you can get for this without going through the engineering if you're in a zoned area, but we're in a non-zoned area and the special permit does not apply.
I
Like
thought
we
the
call,
only thing you had to do in a non-zoned area, even if you were doing a commercial business, was to pay attention to the water runoff and the storm sewer.
Yeah, I would agree, and
I don't recall there, and there may be, but I don't recall anything being in there about.
If that's the case.
I don't.
I think this
Go
is
ahead,
a
Brian.
time to clarify some things, just because you know what you do when you assume something. Okay, so David was following what he was supposed to do, followed. So again, if we want to change, then we need to change.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, and I don't have an issue with this at all from your, I mean, you had a complaint and you had to answer it. I mean, I guess from, and not to by any means interrupt you, I apologize for that. I think this is unique, and I think sometimes when we have unique situations, we should probably just apply some common sense. And I guess my question is, as a board with this particular situation, do we have the ability to issue any type of ruling here and say, I don't know from an engineering standpoint, I agree with Mr. Randolph. If Mr. Smith came before me, I would tell him, I don't know what to do for you. You probably need to go somewhere else because in 20 years of doing this, I don't know how to do this. There is nothing that you need engineering-wise. I can't engineer an existing use. I can't engineer an existing building that all you're going to do is temporarily change how the interior of that building is used. And I guess the other question is it simply change how you advertise it and not advertise it as a commercial venue?
and we don't have a problem paying a permit. We've already talked to the assessor's office about the tax increase and how it's going to be rezoned. We got all that taken care of. We got paperwork from them just waiting once this gets resolved. I just don't understand all the engineering and all the buildings that are goat sheds and what that has to do with if we do rent the barn out for a party or, and some of the, again, the camper questions, some of these things about the flood zone that I've already, again, we'd already gone through the flood zone when we built the barn, and now we're going through the flood zone stuff again, and I don't understand that. That really kind of is what precipitated me to want to come here to the meeting and talk. And I think there's some other things that might just need clarified is, we were told if we wanted to put a fence in a field to stick a cow out there, we need a permit for that. If we wanted to fence in
We had a discussion about that. I told you I didn't know, but I will check on that, and you don't have to put permits.
Okay.
You don't have to put permits for that.
well, originally you said, yeah, then you said you were going to check with Larry, I believe. So like goat sheds and horse, whatever, because I said, if that's true, you're going to need a bigger meeting room if all the farmers in the county got to get a permit every time they got to put a fence up or a goat shed up. So,
Well,
again, we have no problem getting permits. We've shown that. We've sought out permits. We've tried to do what we need to do. We don't have a problem paying more taxes. I think you could go to the assessor's office and look at this property when we bought it what it is today. Most of this land, like when you see in those pictures, you couldn't crawl through there. Like that big 2-acre flat field we want to build our house in one day, we didn't even know that existed. It was so thick and brushy, I couldn't even get a tractor through it. So until we cleared it, we didn't even know what we had in there. So our taxes have obviously gone way up in our assessment, which is a good thing for the county. We think we're doing good things for the county, and we want to be good residents of the county. And again, we don't want to be at odds with the planning commission or the planning office, and we've worked with them in permitting in the past. And
Well, let me interrupt you for a second, just because I want to get this out while it's all on my mind. 3 things come to my mind when we're talking about this situation. Number one, I'm also a minister. And during COVID, I do live in a zoned area, in a residential area, and I performed some weddings in my backyard. So as you were talking, I was thinking, could I have been in trouble for performing weddings in my backyard? I guess the difference would be I didn't advertise my house as a place for people to come to do that. So then I started thinking about churches, and I know of several churches that are unzoned residential areas. And a big thing for them is yard sales and hot dog sales, spaghetti dinners, those kinds of things. So then I start wondering if we're not careful in the way that we, as a board, handle this, are churches potentially going to be in trouble because now if they're advertising a spaghetti dinner, are they now a commercial kitchen instead of a church in a non-zone area? We don't want to get into that either. So I think that we definitely want to be careful the way we handle this. We don't want to set a precedent that damages churches or individuals in our community. So from my next question for staff, and I should know the answer to this, but I don't, is I know that Grits Farm is primarily a farm, but they do the amusement park things because my kids love to go there. Do they have some kind of special permit to be able to do that? Do you know?
I don't know.
Special permits, the term special permits are only for the zone.
For the zone, so do they have some kind of permit as commercial use in order to do their amusement park activity at their farm?
There's no, that would be like a land use regulation.
So isn't that the same kind of situation we're dealing with here then? Because they're advertising that as an amusement fun fair park. It's actually quite large and elaborate and known all over the state.
I mean, I've never been, but I've always wanted to go.
Yeah, it's really a great thing. My kids love that. And I definitely don't want to do anything that would harm Grits because my boy in the back there would kill me if he didn't get to go to Grits Farm 6 or 7 times a year. But,
Like a carnival use up in, where I buy my flowers or a spaghetti dinner.
yeah.
At a church, those are not development as defined by the federal code. So they're already commercial sites. Churches are reviewed under the ILP non-zones as a non-residential site. So there's certain parameters that they meet when they build.
Okay.
Mostly it centers around no adverse impact for stormwater for the most part.
I know that for a fact because we had a situation with that recently.
That's the main ingredient, unless you get into flood zone questions and considerations. So, for you're concerned about a church that having a spaghetti dinner, and you think you advertise and this can be commercial, well, they're already a non-residential site. Any development has already gone through the process.
Okay.
So that's not a concern. As far as Grits goes, like I said, I've never been to the carnival.
Well, I know for a fact they definitely have a commercial kitchen there and they're selling, yeah, they're selling all that stuff.
They would need to go through the commercial building development process.
So do you know if they've done that, if they've done through the commercial stuff?
I personally do not remember having a Grits Farm out there on Grits Road coming through my hands specifically. I can't speak for anyone else, but I don't remember commercial development out on the.
Well, that's my point. I think we want to be careful because we
Yeah,
know
I
that
think
Grits is a
that's-
very
Well,
viable
here's-
business.
They built a lot onto that property.
Exactly.
here's-
They're a good business. We don't want to damage them.
Here's one thing that I'm having a hard time with, and my confusion is, Mr. Smith is not developing anything. Mr. Smith already permitted his development. Mr. Smith permitted the barn through the office 2017, 2019, I think.
19, wasn't it?
And by Mr. Smith wanting to use the structure, maybe we need to redefine development, but this is not development. This is an existing structure that is temporarily being used 10 days out of the year, 90 days out of
I
the
think
year.
that's what we're going to have to do is redefine that as a small use commercial or a large, he's not a large dairy farm that would
Right.
go in and have a lot of runoff. So again, we're going to have to redefine that as something small use that again, he's only using a few times a year. Or, like David is following step by step by step and we've missed a step here.
And
Or an incidental use. for
Incidental
example,
use.
Because, again, it's kind of where I'm hung up too, is he's not changing
Right.
the purpose, the
You're right.
use.
Right.
The primary purpose or use of that property, and after someone comes in for a wedding or a birthday party or whatever, he goes back right the next day and puts the horses and everything else back in there, and the manure and the hay and everything else, right?
Well, actually, it would still be there during the event because we don't have enough other fields to move them to. And the first person to even ask us about this, I'm like, well, there's probably going to be horse smells and there's going to be horse sounds. And I mean, if you can't do this when it's time to feed the animals and if we got to be making hay, we're going to be making hay. I mean, the farm comes first. So they have, if somebody wants to rent this barn or give us money, they're gonna have to work around our farming schedule, because it is a farm. And just, we gotta take care of these animals. We got 30-some animals out there now, 365 days a year we have to take care of.
So if this was a zoned residential house and we wanted to run a lawyer's office out of it, there's already provision in there for a home, whatever it's
It's
called.
an at-home business,
or
occupation, yeah.
But because he's in a zoned resident, or zoned area, we don't have,
Unzoned.
what you're saying is there's nothing in the code already written for that. Is that right?
He's in a non-zoned area.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So there's nothing in there that addresses that.
The text amendment on the agenda for July.
Yeah, and even,
Recycle issues.
which, Mr. Call and I, we talked about that, and, the more and more I think about it, that's really not even applicable for Mr. Smith, because he's not changing the use of the structure. It's not, I mean, to me,
I don't
but,
want to argue about, with anybody, but you got a permit for an accessory use, and he's having, parties and weddings and whatever, and that's fine, whether it's 7 days a year, 9 days a year, whatever. But, that's the impetus for the whole discussion.
Sure.
If we don't want to deal with that, then that's fine.
Maybe the easiest way to handle this is to stop taking money for it and just take donations. Seriously?
Well, apparently we can't advertise those, so you can't get it done if you don't advertise.
we
We want to do it right. We don't mind paying the permit. We don't mind paying the taxes. We want to do it right. We don't want to fine or tell we've been told a lot of things by a lot of people, and I said, I'll just do what you're doing, whatever, just keep doing it. And well, we don't really want to do that. Again, we want to be good. We want to be good residents of the county. We want to get along with the planning commission. We got to build a house eventually. We're going to have, there's going to be things we're going to have to deal with the county, and we don't want to be at odds with anybody. We want to do the right thing. We just think, again, this may be the way it has to be right now, or supposed to be, but is this the right way? We called Kanawha County and talked to them like, they said you'd come in and pay $200, you get a $200 permit, wasn't it? Oh, zero? Don't do anything.
imagine that.
And the other thing, and I don't know why we got, somebody turned us in, but we do know other people that do this that have never changed anything because nobody turned them in. So I don't,
I think, not to cut you off, Mr. Smith, but, from, depending on what the board would want to do, and I'll defer to you, ladies and gentlemen, but, planning obviously had a complaint, and I appreciate you guys addressing the complaint. The complaint's now been brought to us. I believe that we have the jurisdiction and the right to issue a ruling on this complaint in this particular situation, if we so choose to do. And if that is, Mr. Smith needs to go through the engineering hoops, and as an engineer, I don't really know how to do that. Or if we say, hey, we're going to say that, Mr. Smith can go advertise, we've addressed the complaint, this is a unique situation, we don't understand what you need to provide. I think that's the discussion for this board. Because even the upcoming text amendments, until we change this, the next one's not going to really address it because he's not changing his use. He's an unzoned, unincorporated area. So I'll leave that up to the board on.
So the items that were being requested was basically engineering dealing with the floodplain, from what I heard, right?
IOP criteria, we talked about the floodplain, and I totally agree with you on your point. It's an ordinance for commercial development in the non-zoned area.
And he's already submitted that, correct?
No, Mr. Randolph, can you kind of explain what you think you have to prepare for?
Well, what we were asked to do, I asked for clarification from David's office, because I did not want to go through the entire process of treating this like a brand new development. And they did truncate their requirements down considerably. Essentially, what we would end up doing if we were to follow that would be essentially just document what's on the ground. That's it. There is no change that would cause any additional stormwater. We checked, he's outside the floodplain, his bathrooms are outside the floodplain, which was a concern. You know, everything's there.
But what my question is, don't we already have that from the original building permit?
I don't know, I haven't seen that.
Mr. Asbury and I spoke about that, and that's, yes.
So would that original building permit satisfy the needs that you would be looking for this commercial use?
I think in that situation, for that particular criteria, would.
So with that in mind, is it possible for us to approve the use
That's a
today?
simple elevation shot that, he's already approved. Basically, it's a no adverse impact statement, a site plan, and, I don't know, I can't remember what else.
So you're saying there's additional stuff other than the building permit that would need to come in?
As Mr. Randolph said, from that initial list, that'd be a discussion between he and I and Mr. Asbury now, that's been truncated.
Okay.
That was the initial discussion.
So this is, my question here is, would Mr. Randolph still need to provide a site plan that has boundary lines, tax map parcel number, scale, north arrow, location, dimension, labeling of proposed and existing structures? But basically, this is the site plan requirements out of the ILP for, would that still be required?
Per the current ordinance.
And the other question, we weren't even sure if we spend this $4,000 to do all this, is there's still a question like, does that guarantee us to get the permit, or does that mean we could spend $4,000 and still get turned down for the permit? So we spent $4,000 that we can't recuperate by renting out the barn. So that was obviously a concern we had too.
Permit your whole development out there, all the buildings, everything.
I'm sorry, David, I didn't hear you.
That's giving you the opportunity via that site plan process to permit the whole development.
My question would be, why would he need to permit the entire development if he's only going to use the barn? Because you don't need a building permit for a goat shed, you don't need a building permit for a pole barn or any other structure, in my understanding, unless you're going to run utilities to it. You've got goat sheds, they're not utility, you wouldn't need a building permit for that.
Yeah, I think there's one question came up originally, is would there be any other buildings we'd be using as part of any of the venue activities, which there's not. There's not even a building that would be available to use. And again, they're all, they got hay in them, they got tractors in them, they have animals in them.
That's just it's a question. So
Yeah.
that's the answer.
Mr. Dodrell, your legal expertise, I'd love to have you weigh in.
Legally and from a common sense standpoint, I'm struggling.
I've been struggling on this one for a while.
I'm with you.
If the building was originally built with a building permit, and he's not changing the use, he's not adding to the building, he's not constructing anything else to enable him to have some people use that as a venue, then it makes no sense to me.
Well, that sounds good to me, because I think it'll be on my screen too.
I do want to point out, I want to say one thing though. I've been on both sides of government, and I know how it is that sometimes when a customer or entity comes in and they want something that you don't have either clear direction or authority to do. If David's in the situation where he's wondering whether or not the regulations give him the ability to make a certain decision, but he can't see it, I can understand you coming to this board and asking for clarification. So I don't think that anybody on the board's upset with you because we're trying
That's fine.
trying to do that.
I'm just trying to do a job that this book says to do.
Exactly.
And I think it's an opportunity.
I've talked to all three commissioners about it.
Okay.
And Mr. Raspberry and I have conversed about it.
Yeah.
And it is what Clark and Mr. Fry.
Yeah, I think if anything, we should probably, this gives us an opportunity to maybe tweak the ordinance slightly to address this type of non-consequential incidental use of an existing
Yeah.
permitted
And
building.
Mr. Ellis and I were discussing that here just a second ago. I agree we need to do that, but my only concern is, as he stated, he's got a business that he's trying to get off the ground, and I know, but he can only have certain months throughout the year that he can do that. And I'm afraid for us to do that might take a couple of months for us to get that Is there something we can do in the interim that allows him to operate while we're doing that?
The question is, it came here as a citizen concern.
Well, that's true too.
We serve with the will of the commission, the county commission.
Right.
So in my estimation, you talk to them, they decide, and there's nothing really, I don't think we can do tonight.
Yeah, I guess my only question is, I mean, can we say that, Mr. Smith he permitted this under the building permit that he has for that structure? There's no changes to the structure, so if he wants to have a venue there next week, he can go have a venue. There should be no further action, or this board could recommend that no further action would be necessary.
We could ask the office to stand down on what it's been doing so far until we address any tweaks that we want to make. Then he can proceed as he's been doing.
I agree with that until that we can get this resolved, he can just go ahead and continue on.
Mr. President, would this be something that your committee on text amendments and the staff would work on?
Yeah, we can work on getting the ordinance.
Because tonight,
Representing you
this
guys.
isn't on the agenda, it's
Right.
just a citizen concern, so we can't
Yeah.
really.
It's almost like, introducing an injunction for him, or a temporary stay, if anything. Yeah.
I'll call it whatever you want. I don't know how else to handle this. This is
It's a difficult one.
a hole that David, his staff needs fixed, so that they'll know how to move forward.
Absolutely.
From here on out, but we don't want to knock Mr. Smith out of a summer's worth of business. So again, I don't know how to proceed, but, we need to take everybody's concerns into consideration at the same time.
Completely agree.
Because we can't just say, okay, well, let's just throw out why have an ordinance at all if we're not going to follow some certain things, but we just need to clarify it a little.
Yeah, I think we all, well, it's possible we all agree as a commission that what the intent is.
Mm-hmm.
And that this would not be furthering the intent of the ordinance, so we need to tweak it a little bit, and I would suggest that the commission ask the Office of Planning and Infrastructure to temporarily stand down on this issue, give the commission time to come up with a tweak that will better express the intent behind the ordinance that'll serve both sides.
I agree.
Mr. Dodger, would you like to clean that up in the form of a motion?
What I said in the form of
Mr. Dodger's made a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second, and make sure it mentions Smith specifically. I will say though too, there's other people here, I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to this, if we're gonna make a rule, it might be fair just to ask.
Yeah, that Mr. Holman has a great point. If there's anybody else that would. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Humphrey, and I'm from Red House. And my question is, if I would file a complaint against Grits, would they have to come here and do the exact same thing?
I would assume so, but that's a question.
So
I don't
it's
know.
an as-needed individual basis? Is that the way the ordinance is in the county, or is that the way it's done?
In this case, it's very unique in the way that we've discussed. Mr. Smith's here under his own will to talk about this tonight under citizens' concerns. Anybody can come talk in citizens' concerns, and we're addressing his concerns based on that. That's not always how it would be.
Okay.
But in that case, if there was a complaint filed against Grit, there wouldn't be some automatic, hearing that would take place because of that, to answer your question.
Okay. Are the complaints on file for the publics to be able to access? They are?
I'm assuming you'd have to go through a FOIA request for that, am I correct?
I don't see why it would be exempt, no, yeah.
As well as any permits that or that anyone would request through the, they are also? Okay, all right, thank you.
If we wanted to know who filed the complaint, we would be able to know that information. If who filed a complaint on us, we'd be able to know that information.
The FOIA request.
I mean, Mr. Fry or the county attorney might elaborate as to what would need redacted, if it needed redacted, but I mean, I think under the FOIA law, I can't see any reason why that would be exempt.
I mean, again, and we're not ratting anybody, the people I know that doing this other than us, we're not ratting anybody out, but, yeah, I mean, we've had some different people tell us who they think filed the complaint on us, which was another guy that tried to start a venue that got turned down. But from what I understand, he was residential wanting to go commercial, which is totally not what we're wanting to do, so.
The bottom line is, all the information that's kept by the Office of Planning and Infrastructure and by the commission is subject to the Freedom of Information Act, unless there's some exemption in there, which can't think of one off the top of my head. So if someone submits a FOIA request, we'll respond, the county will respond. Provide the documents with the requested documents required by the state.
So just to kind of close this out, Mr. Dodgel, your motion and Mr. Holman, your second, was specific to Mr. Smith and not as a blanket motion for this situation in general,
I
correct?
think, just to be careful, I think that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So we have a motion from Mr. Dodger, of a second from Mr. Holman that will allow Mr. Smith to operate with no further requirements to staff while the ordinance subcommittee works this issue through the text amendment process to bring back before this board and then subsequently go to the planning commission. I'll take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. It's free exercise if you want to come Belhaven. We don't charge you. You get free dinner and everything.
You got an age limit though, don't you? I mean, you only take.
Supervisor, Vic.
You don't want any responsibility for physical harm.
Somebody's got to drive the trucks.
You want to be very careful when. One arm, not one eye, but you know, pretty good to the right-hand side. Short turns to get.
All right, Mr. Smith, Ms. Smith, you guys are more than welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting. We will not be offended if you and Mr. Randolph leave, but just want to let you know that if you don't want to stay here, you don't have to, so. All right, next up is a text amendment, 2023-02, proposal to add towing service. Oops, sorry. Like I was saying, next up is the text amendment to add towing service as a permitted principal use in C2 high density. At this time, I will open the public hearing for this and ask if there's any conflict amongst the members of this board. All right, seeing none.
Excuse me, can you repeat that again?
Yes, this is a public hearing for text amendment 2023-02, which is a proposal to add towing service as a permitted principal use in a C2 high-density commercial district. And staff is going to present what all this is, and then there'll be a time for public comment as well. So no disclosure of conflict amongst the board. Mr. Call, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Text amendment, proposed text amendment 2023-02. Towing services is currently not listed as a C2 use option. Towing service is not listed in any zoning district as either a permitted principal use or a special permitted use, even though there is language in zoning article 1700.17 requirements for unique land uses. Letter J, towing and wrecker service. This text amendment proposes to add the definition of towing service to Article 150.02 definition of terms in the zoning ordinance. And the definition as it is currently listed is as such. Towing service, a facility that dispatches tow trucks and provides temporary storage of operative or inoperative vehicles. This classification does not include automobile repair, automobile wrecking, dismantling, or sales of automotive salvage or automotive parts. That's the definition proposed for Article 150.02. The purpose of the C2 high-density commercial district is to provide for a wide range of commercial uses whose nature of business requires convenient automobile and truck access. Such uses must be accessible to the county as well as the entire region and must be planned in a way to promote and protect commercial and working areas. Article 650.02, we would like, this text amendment proposes to add towing services as a permitted principal use in a C2 high-density commercial zoning district. There's, as I stated earlier, there is existing requirements for unique land uses, letter J, towing or wrecker service, but oddly enough, it is not listed as a permitted or a special permit use. In 1700.17, it lists towing or wrecker service. Storage areas shall be screened. Storage of vehicles must be currently licensed. Storage areas must be subordinate in area to the principal structure. Vehicles may be stored on premises for a maximum of 60 days, and storage areas must be paved. We reviewed in preparation for this discussion, we reviewed the Putnam County Salvage Yard Permit Ordinance and gleaned suggested site design standards for a salvage yard and tweaked them relative to a towing service as opposed to a salvage yard. And you will see those on your screens there. The text is in red and highlighted in yellow. I can go through all this. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read these or not. It's pretty lengthy, but it discusses the required setbacks. One setback that we feel is appropriate is the use shall be located at least 100 feet from the property boundary of any residential use. The precedent for that language can be found in the zoning ordinance for the zoned unincorporated areas of Putnam County, Article 1100.07, automobile repair, including body and paint work. Otherwise, the standard C2 setbacks would apply. There is suggested screening stipulations here. It's mostly screening. Wrecker tow vehicle service and maintenance, storage and maneuvering.
David, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
I'm looking at your setbacks that are 100 feet from the property boundary of any residential use. From what I understand, what you were saying is you went into the other areas and pulled certain things out that you thought would be applicable. And I noticed in the parentheses, it says that the precedents can be found in the zoning and zone incorporated areas about automotive repair and body and paint work. But then I noticed in the usage, it specifically says that that it's not going to allow any automotive repair.
No, that's correct. That is simply the 100-foot setback.
Yeah, so is the 100-foot setback then the intent for that in order for an automotive or repair shop to cut down on the smell of paint and the noise that would be involved? But if you're not going to be doing any of that, is it really required? Do you think that that's really necessary?
Well, that would be something for you guys to decide.
Yeah, and Mr. Call and I, we talked about that, and I told him that I thought it was worth keeping in, and I instructed him to do that just for this board to have the discussion on whether this board felt that 100-foot for this use was necessary. And not to continue to interrupt you, Mr. Call, but to kind of go off of what Mr. Pack said, if that 100-foot stayed in as that setback for this use, is that the only use in the C2 commercial district that would require the 100-foot setback? There's no other permitted principal uses that are currently in there that require the 100-foot, is that correct?
As far as I know,
Okay.
the only one is for the automotive, the 1700.17.
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong place. 1100.07, automotive repair.
And it's something, go ahead if you had another.
Yeah,
I was going to say, my intent wasn't to bog him down and not let him present. I just wanted to get that out while I was thinking about it, and I don't care to discuss that after you're finished.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was simply, simply put in for discussion, and we felt that there was precedent for the 100-foot setback based upon, this other zoning language. Otherwise, standard C2 zoning setbacks would apply. And I can talk about, would you like me to read all this screening, or have you had a chance to read that and have any questions? A lot of stuff here. I'd be glad to read it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do have one question. That is on the solid screening.
Okay. Which,
Oh, boy.
number 2?
yes. I think we're 2A maybe.
Okay.
There's a comment about it's got to be a solid screen. My question is, if somebody came before you with a chain link fence with the inserts that go down in that chain link fence, would that be considered solid screening? Or does solid screening mean it has to be a vinyl wall or a wood wall?
Well, according to the ordinance language that we gleaned these design criteria for discussion, that would not be, as it says here in
Section C. says
C,
that.
yeah, I'm sorry, I just saw C.
Okay. I know exactly the material you're speaking of.
Yeah, actually, it's defined. I'm sorry, I hadn't read down that far.
Okay. Now, there is a discrepancy about the height of fences in the language that's already in 1700.17. It says the height of the fence would be 6 feet high, a minimum of 6 feet high. And then as you see in E, it says the minimum height would be 7 feet. So there is a not to exceed 12 feet. So that would be a discussion whether you wanted the minimum to be 6 feet or 7 feet, if we get to that point. Wrecker and tow vehicle service and maintenance talks about how the wreckers are to be serviced and maintenance indoors
guess
within
that
the
does.
building. There should be no outdoor storage of wrecker or tow vehicles except within an area defined on the site plan that is totally screened from view on all sides by an opaque fence that is a minimum of 7 feet high, or if we choose 6 feet. Storage and maneuvering, that's basically to make sure that the wrecker, the big wreckers can navigate the property.
I have a question on the definition and then the time that we're going to allow the vehicles to be there. The definition says that they can do it, it provides temporary storage, but it doesn't define what temporary is, of operative or inoperative vehicles. And then at the bottom, under 4, storage and maneuvering, it requires the stored vehicles to be currently licensed. So we're not talking about abandoned vehicles, right?
That's correct. And it also, I'm sorry.
And then secondly, it mentions wrecked or damaged vehicles can be stored on premises for maximum 90 days or 60 days.
60 days.
What about just simply operative or inoperative vehicles that aren't wrecked or damaged?
Wrecked or damaged vehicles. Good point.
I mean, probably need to make that uniform to match up with the definition. And, that will, by doing that, that'll define what we mean by temporary storage of operative or inoperative vehicles.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll just say that, in my line of work, what I'm seeing, not just in West Virginia, but across the country, thanks to the supply chain issues and what have you, not only tow yards, but also body shops are having to have vehicles on the premises for a much, much longer period of time, because you can't get parts, and it's taking a much longer time. People are in rental vehicles under their insurance policies for half the time when there's coverage for it, so that's just something I'll throw out there in case we want to consider that. As far as the length, nobody wants abandoned vehicles stored for an undue period of time, but I just want to throw that out there for what we're experiencing, not just in West Virginia, but everywhere.
Another situation is, I item 3, section C. It says that there shall be no outdoor storage of wrecked or towed vehicles, except within an area defined on the site plan that is totally screened from view on all sides, and it says an opaque fence. Whereas the other is talking about a solid fence. An opaque fence would, in my mind, include chain link fence that you can partially see through. And then it also mentioned,
It's got a minimum of 7 foot high, so we need to make sure that fence height is whatever we
uniform throughout.
decide on is uniform.
Correct.
I'd like to ask this gentleman, what is the fence at your place? Is it 6 or 7 feet? I mean, he's had a record service for a long, long time.
How tall is your fence? Yeah.
Oh,
9 foot.
okay.
That's really a state requirement, not a
Yeah.
county.
You said that is a state requirement?
I would imagine, but everything that our facility is, it's state. We are through the state.
That,
We
that,
are we are through the state guidelines.
okay.
Right. And then one more thing too, my goodness, on 2G, it says there shall be a 30-foot rear and side yard area from any residential district or any residence, whereas before we were talking about a 100-foot setback. So,
Yeah, that's not a setback, that's just talking about a yard. It's not talking about an actual setback. I found that odd as well.
yeah,
But just pulled it from the ordinance for discussion's sake.
okay.
Yeah, if you read it, it's not the setback, it's talking about a yard.
So does that mean like a paved yard where they're storing vehicles, or what does it mean when it refers to a yard?
I'm assuming green space, a buffer of green space. Again, these are discussion topics, for you guys to
Yeah, I think that we need to clearly define that.
take or leave,
Either.
7 feet of gravel.
Wish I had hands right on it down.
Now, does the state, does it, and, how does it govern where record services? Should we maybe adopt their
Yeah, that-
wording or do we want something totally different?
I
I don't know, I don't want
yeah.
to create more work for you, but,
I'm always a big fan of adopting state code and leaving it blank as it's state code, and that way if state code
they've been
changes, it just,
following
yeah.
for 30 years, so.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Mr. Ellis.
state code relative to
Screening, placement, setback.
all of these site design criteria.
But the fact of the matter is, for these folks, if we make changes, it doesn't really affect them, right? They're grandfathered into whatever.
Yeah, oh, yes.
You're right,
whatever
right.
they do. So it's,
Actually, it does affect.
how's it affect you?
Well, hey, Mr. Yates, we'll give them a second here in a minute if you don't, if it's okay, before we kind of follow the process here.
The reason I'm looking so close on this is because this is close to me, because I went to a training class last week and went into a restaurant, pick up lunch that I ordered online, and when I came out, my car was gone because I had parked in a parking lot in Morgantown that didn't have a sign that was visible. So after an afternoon of getting an Uber and getting to the site, I took a real good close look at the tow site. And that was their entire business, was just towing people from parking lots. But it was right up against an apartment complex and homes, a very small little lot, maybe held about 5 cars in it, and a little tow truck behind a 9-foot fence. So being from planning and zoning, I thought, well, that's interesting how Morgantown's handling it. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Rite of passage in Morgantown here.
Yeah,
It's the best
and yeah,
business in
don't
Morgantown.
go into Morgantown and run in without parking at a meter.
I carried a letter that you just did, or towing. Sorry, Mr. Cole.
Well, I think we've, facts that need to be determined, if we're done with discussion relative to site design standards. I will research state code relative to towing service site design standards and see what I can find. Facts that need to be determined. The proposed amendment will protect and promote public health, safety, convenience, moral, and general welfare. Governing body, with the advice of the Planning Commission, must find that the amendment is consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan and ordinances. If the amendment is inconsistent, the governing body, with the advice of the Planning Commission, must find that there have been major changes of an economic, physical, or social nature within the areas involved, which were not anticipated when the comprehensive plan was adopted, and those changes have substantially altered the basic characteristics of the area. So I don't know if we want to get lost in the weeds relative to the site design standards, or if we want to, consider just consider the towing service as a permitted use in the C2. That's for you guys to decide.
I think we'll take any public comment, and then we can kind of discuss that amongst the board and clarify any of these other sections that need clarified in terms of setback, et cetera. So before I open up public comment at this time, does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Call and what he presented? All right. Well, anybody in the public that would like to come up and speak, just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Kimberly Humphrey, and my address is 57 Canal View, Red House. And my concern would be mainly with the 100-foot setback. I don't know if any of you have been around tow trucks, but the noise and the smell and everything about, it's bad, you know what I mean? I think that's one of the reasons probably why the state has it listed as the way that it is. And I don't believe a lot of residential areas would like that type of business in their back door. Especially whenever there are facilities that are available in the county for this. And I would hope that you would take that into consideration. Thank you.
You think that's too much, too little?
No, I think 100 foot is not enough.
Okay.
Yeah, because.
That's what I took, I was just making sure.
Yeah, I don't think, I think it should actually be more, but, it's nasty. Even as far as that goes, the vehicles that, they pollute the ground. You're going to have, as far as with the stormwater, the drainage from all of these wrecked vehicles that are going to be on the ground, running around, that's the reason why the state has their guidelines, is because they don't want the contamination to the ground, to our environment. I think that's about it.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but any applicant would still be required to meet any state permit requirements, and which would probably fall in this case an industrial multi-sector permit to alleviate those types of concerns.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
I'm assuming that's the reason why the requirement in there to have a paved lot as well, so it doesn't seep into gravel or ground.
Yeah. Anybody else, citizens concerned, would like to come up, or public comment, like to come up? State your name and address, please.
Hi, my name's Chris Reed. My business address is 925 Midland Trail in Hurricane. I live in St. Albans. I own Hurricane Wrecker Service, and I've been the president of the West Virginia Towing and Recovery Association for about 10 years now. So I've got a little bit of insight as to what we were talking about earlier as far as the storage lot requirements. West Virginia Public Service Commission's MCS 150 has their requirements laid out pretty specific in there as far as the height of the fence and the barrier screening. I'm not real sure what section it's in. I wasn't
What
prepared.
was it?
I
I'm
apologize.
sorry to interrupt you. What was that article, or you?
It's the West Virginia Public Service Commission. I believe it's the MC 150.
MC
The
150.
West Virginia
Yeah.
Code of Regulations, section 150.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Section you're talking about offenses, 6.9.2.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't prepared. I can get you in the general vicinity, but I can't quote the exact locations in there. But they do have it pretty laid out as far as statewide recommendations. Now, I'm not sure if county or city trumps what they say or not. I know the city of Charleston requires a paved storage lot. Kanawha County does not. It can be gravel. That's, I guess, basically up to the municipality or the city or whatever sets their own rules on that. The 60-day storage, the only comment I would have on that is, and I may need your help on this again, Mr. Dodrell, in West Virginia State Code Section 24-2A, somewhere in that neighborhood, it lays out on how we're supposed to notify owners of wrecked and abandoned vehicles who haven't came and got their vehicle. Towing company has 30 days. They have to notify by registered letter the registered owner and any lien holders on record of their possession of that vehicle. Once that owner receives that certified notification, they have 10 days to reply. That gets you around 40 days. Okay, the kicker on that is, in order for us to find out who that vehicle owner is and any lien holders, we have to go to the West Virginia DMV, provide them with the VIN number. It's like a $5 fee. Sometimes you get them back same day, sometimes it's a couple days. They provide you with the vehicle, the last registered owner's name, if it's registered in the state of West Virginia. Some of these vehicles we get are from Ohio, Kentucky, Florida, just wherever. At that point, you have to go to that state's DMV, find out what their process is to get the registered owner's personal information, and then you have to follow the same procedure once you've obtained that information. It's getting a little better now. Back during our pandemic, it was taking us over a month just to get the information. So we were in violation of the state code's notification window just to get the information. It was putting us out of 30 days. So there were some small issues there. They worked through them. But the 60-day thing, that may be something you want to think about, just take into consideration. And a lot of these vehicles, the reason they're being towed is because they're not properly registered. They're moving violations. They don't have license or insurance. They're registered in someone else's name. Deputy pulls them over. He has them towed. So that poses a little bit of problem with that language as well, as far as being licensed. Now we don't want to muddy the waters with salvage yard versus storage yard. I believe Mr. Casto's salvage yard is 100% compliant with state salvage yard regulations. He's got one of the cleanest salvage yards I've ever saw. Very nice looking down there. Wrecker storage yards, the term storage has a totally different definition than salvage. Salvage, you're dismantling vehicles, reselling parts. Storage, you're basically storing the vehicle until an insurance agent can come out, do his adjustment, determine whether it's a total loss or repairable, at which point it'll go to Copart over in Hurricane usually, or it'll go to a repair shop to be fixed. That process, a few weeks, 2 or 3 weeks usually, and it's out there. The abandoned vehicles, the ones that are unclaimed, that are uninsured, those are the ones that take a little longer. That state code, I think, might clear that up a little bit as far as the timeline that it takes to properly process a vehicle to where we can move it to a salvage yard or a crusher or whatever. After that 10 days is expired, we can do whatever we want with it. We can file for an abandoned vehicle title. We can sell it for salvage to a licensed salvage yard such as Mr. Casto, or we can take it to a local crusher.
So that, is it Mr. Reed? Is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
So you said after the 30 days, then you have to notify them 10 days, they have to respond.
They have 10 days to respond once they receive their notification.
If they don't respond, the car's or the vehicle's in your hands.
Right.
If they respond, do they have a certain amount of time to come pick it up? Or is it
It's in that 10-day window.
Okay.
Yeah, once they receive their certified notification, the clock starts ticking, and they have 10 days to come, and I think it says pay all towing and storage preservation charges and
Okay.
and retrieve their vehicle.
Okay.
So,
And
yeah.
Question, is your lot paved or gravel?
My lot in Charleston is paved, my lot in Kanawha County, and my lot in Hurricane are gravel.
I thought yours was gravel.
Yeah.
Mr. Reed, do you know what your setback requirements are in the city of Hurricane?
I
For
do not.
residential?
I do not. When I,
Because you do a butt right up, or kind of butt up against residential.
yeah, Hurricane record was already established when I purchased it back in
Okay.
2008, so.
How far away is it from residential? Do you know particular approximately how many feet? 40 yards?
Yeah, probably there's well, see, that's kind of catch-22 too there, because some of the residential, when I purchased Hurricane Record, belonged to the existing owner of Hurricane Record, and it was on the same parcel, so he had some rental property there.
Anybody have any questions or additional questions for Mr. Reed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? You just come up and just state your name and,
My name's Gary Casto. I own salvage yard since 1987. One of my question is this, what are you going to change on the towing policy? Is anything going to change?
no, sir, this has nothing, for this body and what we're hearing, has nothing to do with the towing policy.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what we're looking at tonight has nothing to do with the towing policy.
We don't have any kind of.
Yeah, we don't have any jurisdiction, so to speak, over the towing policy.
That's what I need to know.
Yeah, Ms. Cassie,
I'm back.
or Humphrey, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm Miss Humphrey. I just had a question. I'm curious, how many vehicles are currently stored at the towing facility that is owned by Mr. Reed?
Mr. Reed, do you have any guess of, or estimate of what that is?
That are abandoned or left?
I
or-
would say 30 or 40 at any given time on the average.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the public on this particular issue? All righty, we'll close the public comment period. We have any other questions for staff? And do we want to discuss these issues as while the public hearing is still open? Because there's some cleanup things I think we need to do, and,
Need to do some cleanup.
yeah. Yes, sir.
My only concern is just that, I mean, Putnam County's, obviously, we're very proud of Putnam County and its growth and what we've been able to do as the planning commission, serving the county commission. And unfortunately, sometimes our hands are tied when it comes to situations that are grandfathered. And you look at the old Danny Chapman's automobile dealership over there in Tays Valley. That's, he'd turn over in his grave, and then there's like two other, junkyards that are, we can't do anything about, so my only concern is that, our regulations and that we permit this, that we, keep in mind that, we want to make sure that we're, doing right by the citizenry and we're not doing anything to downgrade Putnam County. Serve the citizens and the people and the businesses.
We are just talking about C2, right?
Yes, this is just C2 high-density commercial. Mr. Call, is there C2 zoning North Putnam, north side of the river?
There's C2 on the north, right?
Buffalo Bridge area, or this side of the river?
On the north side of the river.
Is it, okay. Anything in our jurisdiction I call North Putnam, and it's probably not North Putnam, on the Winfield side of the river, but up towards the Winfield Buffalo Bridge side. Is that any of that okay. 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 Okay.
I believe, well, let me help everybody kind of understand is, Mr. Reed is wanting to build a lot or a wrecker service at the old truck stop on 817 at 5 and 20. And it's not zoned for that, I don't believe. And Mr. Casto has a salvage yard right down the street, that right by the Buffalo Bridge, that's been there for many, many years, and it hasn't been an issue at all. So I think this is what we're trying to do, is just clear it up, either so he can either build there at 5 and 20 or not. We're just going to.
And I think there's at least from my understanding of the towing and what's kind of going on in the county, there's a definite need for a facility of this nature on this side of the county.
We had just went through this with a wrecker service out of Kanawha County with the Castos, and if the Castos wanted to do it themselves, because they've been in business in the county for many, many years, but the other company wanted to lease some property from the Castos, and I wasn't in favor of that because the company was from Kanawha County and hadn't been here a year. And it says that you have to be in business a year to be put onto the rotation. Again, anybody can start a wrecker service anywhere, do whatever they want to do. I'm fine with that. But that's the only reason that I had anything, I'll say, I won't even say a negative reaction, but to the company from Kanawha County. And the Castos are fine people. I don't want to get that mixed up or anything, but it's just, we're clearing some things up.
Yeah, and just so I think in case the rest of the board, I'm kind of read into this situation, I think, fairly well. Hurricane Wrecker is the current and the only wrecker service in the county that meets our ordinance requirements for the 911 call out. So having the need and having the facility on this side of the river, what I call this side of the river, this side of the county, will obviously aid in response time, et cetera, if the sheriff's department needs to call out a wrecker. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Ellis?
That in fact is.
So once again, the decisions we make here today not only affect a business that wants to expand, but any other future business that wants to come into the district or into the county. I go back to the several points that we saw in this. My personal opinion is I think that we should allow for the expansion of business, and we should be able to do it in a responsible manner that affects the citizens of our community the best, so that we don't get into situations like we had earlier today. I think we need to be careful the way that we word it. So in my opinion, before we voted to approve or disapprove this, I think that we would, well, maybe even not. Maybe we should find out the intent of the board first. But before we put it through, I think we need to determine for sure whether we're going to go with a 6-foot or 9-foot fence, whether the fences are going to be opaque or solid, whether we're going to go with 100 feet or 130 feet. And there was one other thing that Mr. Ellis had mentioned, and I forgot what it was. I should have wrote it down. But I do think we need to hash those out today. I think it would be better for us to do it now than to send it back to subcommittee and delay things.
I agree. And for the record, Mr. Call did a good job on pulling this together, and him and I worked a lot on this. Due to the timing, I made the decision to kind of I don't have to take anything through that ordinance subcommittee, and I chose not to take this through the ordinance subcommittee because I felt it would be better for this board just to hash these type of items out here once and for all, and kind of looking at it from the timing of this as well. So that is why there is a little bit more cleanup than what we typically see on an ordinance amendment.
would recommend that, so we're going to go back, have more work done on this, that we do it, take a look at both CSR 150 and Chapter 17, Article 23, which covers the storage yards, salvage yards, Department of Highways, or I forget who controls that. Because we want to make sure that the provisions we do have in here don't conflict with the state law. For example, there's one that already conflicts with the state law says that the fences have to be a minimum of 8 feet high. So, we just want to make sure we don't conflict because.
Not to really simplify, but Mr. Doddridge, would it be as simple as saying that these requirements just need to follow state code? And that way we don't, if state code changes that fence height, and we just have a blanket statement for screening in these items that our ordinance requires you to follow state code, it's caught there.
I mean, we do have some leeway on some of the parts that aren't addressed in the statute, like setback. The statute doesn't address setback.
Okay.
So if we want to do something on that, we can. We just want to make sure we don't do anything that specifically conflicts with the state statute or the regs.
Okay. Did you see anything specifically in that code that mentioned whether it should be opaque or solid, the fence?
Just said the fence has to be completely secluded. I forget. It's not as specific as Mr. Paul put in here.
Understood.
There's a limit as to how many abandoned vehicles. I think you're only allowed to have 3 of those vehicles stored at any one time at any facility.
Which, yes, I mean, I think from cleaning this up, my opinion would be screening, storage and notification, and then the stored vehicle, which is, my notes are right, 4F and 4E, should follow state code, as well as the screening should follow state code. And then we can discuss here on the setback. And if we get to the point to approve this, we could entertain that Mr. Call makes these changes and run it back through us via email or via the president of the board for review prior to going to the county commission, if we get to that point.
So what are you basically saying, like a conditional approval?
What's it?
Like a conditional?
Yeah, add that in as a condition of the approval once we work, if we get there working through the worksheet. As far as the setbacks go, I'm open either way on the 100-foot or, 100-foot is in there, if you have a facility that's a paint shop, true automobile repair for, that's the setback in there for those types of uses. Yeah, I don't have an issue with the 100-foot and then requiring a 100-foot for this particular use in C2.
No, at first I thought it was a little much, and then the comments said maybe it's not enough, so maybe 100 is a good number to me.
It appears like from the map he showed me, his other salvage yard is meeting that requirement.
Yeah, based on what I looked up here, the yard in Hurricane's roughly 100, probably 150 feet from residential. That's, which I get, Hurricane's got their own zoning.
Generally, a hurricane will follow state code.
Yeah.
So then we come into the rear and the side yard. Do we want to strike that? Do we want to include that as part of the 100 feet? 100 feet, 30 must be greenery, or?
I guess my question, and maybe this is a question back for Mr. Reed, what is this the 30-foot rear yard? Could we get a little better definition of what that intent is? If it's not a setback, say that again.
When they refer to the setback, are they referring to the actual front of your building or the beginning of your storage lot?
Technically, it's the property boundary.
That's not the,
To your office front door, or like if we're building off
He's wondering, is the fence gonna be 100 foot away from a residential or right up against residential?
It says the use shall be located at least 100 feet from
Which
the
would
property
be
boundary.
Which would mean storage. You wouldn't be able to
The
store
use.
anything closer than 100 foot. That's a good question, though. Is the fence going to be at the residential line, or is it going to be, the fence itself going to be 100 foot back?
Any more than that's excessive.
Yeah, I think to avoid, I think we need to clearly define that. And is there any definition, Mr. Call, for when we say the use? What is defined? I mean, is in this situation, like Mr. Pack said, is that the storage yard and the building?
Well, there are different, several definitions for use. If I can find one that's relevant.
That's why I didn't close the public hearing yet.
The reason I asked that, it'll play a big role in our site plan as to the locations where we put our fenced-in lot, where we put our actual office.
Yeah, that's the question too, is can the office be closer than the 100 foot? I don't know.
Within the, again, this is a definition from the zoning ordinance. Use, any purpose for which a building or other structure of a tract of land may be maintained or occupied, or any activity, occupation, business, or operation carried on in a building or other structure or on a tract of land.
I think that would be everything.
That'd be everything.
I mean, for me, if I'm living next to a salvage yard or a storage yard, I'm going to want their fence 100 feet away. I'm going to want some weed-eated yard or something between me and that fence. I wouldn't be opposed to that.
So you, go ahead, Jason.
This is the way this, and I'm just asking because I think I know the answer to this, but the property boundary and residential use, if you are bound on all four sides with residential, or three sides with residential use, then it's 100 foot off each property boundary, correct? Yeah. Right.
We talk about against the residential use.
Yeah,
Yes.
the 100 foot from the property boundary, so if you're.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's not 100 feet from the road, it's 100 feet from a residential property.
Yes.
Setback on the main highway would be in effect, and it would only be the 100 foot from residential.
Yeah, it's just residential.
My only.
If it's commercial, then you don't have that.
My only comment on this, because I agree with Mr. Pack on this as well, but we do allow truck, large and trailer sales, lease rental services, which you can allow truck storage, trailer storage in this use without a more restrictive setback. So is this appropriate to consider just applying a 100-foot setback for this use when there are similar uses allowed without a more restrictive setback in this zone already? That's the only thing I want to debate probably on that.
What are the other uses?
Truck, the way it's defined here is truck, large and trailer sales, lease, rental, or services. Let's see.
That's
Medical cannabis dispensers, dog kennels. I'm just thinking of noise and things. Heavy construction and farm equipment sales, lease, rental, or services.
And what is their setback?
What is that setback, Mr. Call? 30 feet for the?
So we talk about standard C2 setbacks, or?
Yes, standard C2 setbacks. 30, I think. Well, you'd have whatever the rear yard and the side yard and the front yards are for those uses. I mean, your automobile service station does not have a more restrictive setback when it comes to that. And Mr. Call, if I'm misspeaking, please tell me. But
Well, a minimum front setback, unless stipulated otherwise, would be the 20 feet. The minimum side yard, unless stated otherwise, is in a C2, is none if a commercial use abuts a commercial use. When abutting a residential district, of course, that's what we're talking about here. Minimum rear yard setback is 20 feet when abutting a residential use, but none when abutting a commercial or industrial district.
different than some of those other uses in terms of what the, what the actual.
What,
I see his point, though, because if
Well,
we
hang
go
on.
and order a backhoe, they're gonna unload and load that backhoe, and there's.
It's gonna have the same smell, it's gonna have the noise.
Well, I mean, if you ask me if I'd rather live next to a dog kennel or a wrecker, I'd pick the latter all day, to be honest with you. I mean, sight, smell, sound, I mean,
Right.
so I don't know why a wrecker would be more restrictive.
Well, and here's the other, and I don't know, Mr. Call, you may have to do some flipping into Article 1700 and 1700.17 for setbacks, but also allowed in this use is commercial entertainment and clubs, which also generate noise, et cetera.
I feel like your statement earlier in the evening about the body shop with the 100-foot setback was directed towards paint fumes and overspray dust.
Yeah, which is obviously not allowed here, so I just want to make sure that we're not hammering at one use and treating it more unfair than similar uses that are already allowed in this zone without more restrictive setbacks.
I think it's a fair point.
I would agree with that. I recant my former statement.
I mean, I would probably rather live by a record shop than a dog kennel. I don't want to hear.
I love dogs, by the way.
Yeah, I've got 2 dogs. I love them to death, but I send them to.
I think you know what I mean.
The ASPC or whatever it is, you know.
But basically, you're looking at standard setbacks, referring everything else to the state code if we decide to approve it.
Correct. And we can attach that as conditions.
I think that if we attach it as conditions, even though it's already goes without saying.
Well, conditions that Mr. Call, addresses this prior to going to, if we go that way, prior to going to the county commission.
I think when you throw in the fact that there's solid screening required of 7 feet, I believe 8 feet.
8 feet.
I mean, that requirement alone is when you throw that in with the setback, I don't think it needs to be treated much differently, if I'm being honest.
If these other uses weren't permitted principal structures or principal uses, I'd have probably a completely different opinion on this. But I can correlate a lot of these uses are very similar in nature, and they're not more restrictive. And you could argue some may be more of a nuisance than this one. All right, if there's no other discussion, I will close, what's that? Yeah, I'll close the public hearing and go to the worksheet here. So anybody else have any other questions?
I had one more thing on the paving. I know Mr. Reed noted his lot was gravel and Hurricane. Well, he's under the Hurricane.
He's under city, yeah, but yeah.
Okay, so would anybody, I guess there's nobody else to address. I was wondering if we needed a grandfather or something, but I think that's under separate set of zoning.
Yeah, it's under separate. Yeah, if we want to make it paving, we can. If we want to leave that up.
I mean, I can see where, damaged cars come in that could leak oil and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, are we talking about parking? Are we talking about the parking?
Paving.
Paving, right.
Versus aggregate.
Yeah. In the rest of the ordinance, a parking area in a C2 has to be paved.
Okay, well, then they keep it uniform.
Yeah.
Probably makes sense.
And I get, before I do close this, I guess the only other thing that may still be hanging out here is this rear yard. Does that go away if we just apply the setbacks that are already in the zoning?
I would say so.
Because
I'd recommend, since there's not clarification about what it actually means, it goes away.
yeah, we can add that as a condition that, I agree with you, Mr. Call, that 2G would be stricken.
So was the consensus that the 100-foot to the residential was good, or?
No, I think the consensus is that we will strike the 100-foot.
Oh, strike the 100-foot, okay.
And only the setbacks that apply are what's already established.
Standard C2
setbacks
okay.
in the C2 zone. We'll clean all this up in a motion if we get to that point through the worksheet. Because I'd like, if we get there, I'd like to do it as conditions for you to address and make revisions and send it through to the county commission.
Okay.
If nobody else has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
I have one more.
Okay.
Do you notify the neighbors of this, like the adjoining properties? Will the adjoining properties be notified of this?
No, ma'am, the notification, and Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong, the notification that went out was that this was going to be heard today. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, this was noted, not necessarily adjoining properties, but there's a public notice that we're having this meeting tonight to discuss this. Is that fair?
Yeah, there was a
Public hearing, yeah.
but no one would receive notice
Right.
of a particular use that's going in this permit principle.
Correct. All right, with that, I will close the public hearing, and we will go through the worksheet here for the relevant facts that need to be determined. First one is, will the proposed amendment protect, promote public health, safety, convenience, morals, and general welfare?
I think that if we adopt the proposed ideas, that it will bring a much-needed presence down on 817 on that end. We need the business. Mr. Reed does a good job with his, and it may spark other businesses to come down that way. So I think it does fit the plan and with the general welfare.
So Mr. Yeager has a yes. Does anybody wish to issue additional opinion or a difference of opinion? Okay. Number 2, is the amendment consistent in achieving the objectives of the adopted comprehensive plan, US 35 Corridor Management Plan, and the Tays Valley Land Use Plan?
I would say that it is, because the type of business that we're looking at adding as a principal use is in line with other similar businesses that are already approved.
I have a yes from Mr. Pack. Same question. Anybody like to offer a difference of opinion or additional information? All righty. So that is, we have answered both in the affirmative. At this point, I will take a motion to accept the worksheet. I have to take a motion for the worksheet, right, Mr. Paul?
Pardon me?
We to make a motion for the worksheet at this point, right? It's been a while since I've had a public
Well,
hearing.
I don't think you have to go to the third item if you've answered affirmative in 1 and 2.
Yeah, 1 and 2 has been affirmative.
Right.
So at this point, I will take a motion to approve and send this to County Commission. And if somebody would like to make that motion with the conditions that we discussed to have Mr. Call clean some of this language up, that'd be great.
So moved.
Yes, Mr. Dodger?
Question?
Yes, sir.
Are we going to see I understand there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done on this. Are we going to see it again before it goes?
It's going to deliver an email.
It's up to you guys as the board. If you want to have it brought back before us, we can. If you would rather have it sent out via email for review, just thinking of timing.
At least that. I mean, I don't want to slow the process down unnecessarily, but I do have some questions about what it's going to look like.
Sure.
When we're all done.
Make an amendment, depending upon the review.
Yeah, we can, include that as your condition, that it has to go through one final review. And if you want to do that via email or if.
Second the motion with that stipulation.
So we have a motion and a second that we are going to recommend this for approval. And the conditions attached to that is that the screening requirements will be amended to follow state code. The storage and the notification requirements will be amended to follow state code. The stored vehicle and licensed requirement will also follow state code. We will be striking 2G from the presented document, and we will also change and strike the 100-foot setback that was presented from residential use, and that the setbacks only follow what is already established in the C2 zone. I think I got all that. And also part of this amendment, prior to this going to County Commission, it will be sent back amongst the board for final review. And we can do that via email. Mr. Call and I have done quite a bit of that in the past, and it works pretty well. So, have a motion, have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Call, while you write that down, I'm going to take a 30-second break. Okay.
RV, it's an RV, Clark.
Yes.
Paddle shifting is really sweet. That was so 680.
All right, the next item on our agenda here is a public hearing for text amendment 2023-03, which is a proposal to add recreational vehicle park as a permitted principal use in a C2 high-density commercial district. With that, I will open the public hearing. Any disclosure of conflict? Seeing none, Mr. Call.
All right, 2023-03, a recreational vehicle RV park is listed as a special permit use option in a C1 suburban commercial district, but is currently not listed as a use option at all in a C2 high-density commercial district. Article 150.02 definition of terms defines recreational vehicle RV park as such. Any property operated as a business where more than one recreational vehicle site is rented to users or recreational vehicles and which are occupied for temporary purposes. A recreational vehicle park may or may not include commercial recreation as defined by this ordinance. A recreational vehicle park is also known as an RV park and is not to be permitted or used for a permanent residential setup, a full-time dwelling development, or for outdoor storage. That is the existing definition in the zoning ordinance. In the Article 650.01, the C2 high-density commercial district is to provide for a wide range of commercial uses whose nature of business requires convenient automotive and truck access. Such uses must be accessible to the county as well as the entire region and must be planned in a way to promote and protect commercial and working areas. This text amendment proposes to add recreational vehicle RV park as a permitted principal use in a C2 high-density commercial zoning district. We have existing language in Article 1700.17, requirements for unique land uses that are relative to RV parks. Maximum gross density allowed for the park development shall be one recreational vehicle per 1,000 square feet of pervious land area. Minimum of 10-foot front setback shall exist between all interior roads, streets, and structures and/or permanent improvements, such as a bathhouse, sanitary station, gazebo, picnic shelter, etc. In addition to the parking area for a recreational vehicle, a minimum of one off-street parking space should be required in each recreational vehicle site for an automobile. It shall be located within the boundaries of the individual rented recreational vehicle site. The submitted site plan must delineate the individual spaces allotted for a recreational vehicle and the automobile's off-street parking space. In addition, one off-street parking space per each 3 recreational vehicle spaces shall be required for guest parking. Each recreational vehicle site shall have a minimum width of 20 feet. Minimum spacing between recreational vehicles shall meet the state of West Virginia and Putnam County Health Department's minimum standards. Those are printed in the purple shade in your packet per Title 64, Legislative Rule Bureau for Public Health Department of Health and Human Resources, Series 18, General Sanitation. States, in campgrounds, 1,200 square feet of space shall be provided for each campsite, which is a contradiction to what we have over here where it says 1,000 square feet. Well, that says 1,000 square feet of pervious land shall be provided for each campsite. The average campground density shall not exceed 25 campsites per acre. In campgrounds, camping units, including canopies and similar appurtenances, shall be separated from other camping units on adjacent campsites and all campground buildings and structures by a minimum distance of 10 feet. There shall be at least 10 feet of space between a camping unit and any campground street, common parking area, or other common use areas, and at least 20 feet between a camping unit and a public road. You see in Article 6 here, where we have changed this term to read compliant and approved landscaping shall be maintained. Storage and collection, screening services and structures. I mean, I can go on reading this, but I'm sure you guys have probably already read this quite a bit. It goes on to talk about sewage disposal, sanitary dumping.
We're just carrying over most of the language from C1.
This is existing language from Article 1700.17 of the zoning ordinance. It's not specific to C1, although C1 is the only place where it actually allows an RV park as a special permitted use. So this is ordinance language that is in the book, except for number 5, where we've added the purple, because that's a clarification of where it states Putnam County Health Department's minimum standards, and that's the purple. And there is that contradiction between the 1,200 and the 1,000. But the rest of it is existing language in our ordinance.
The question I have is Article number 6, where it says compliant and improved landscaping. Compliant would indicate that there's some sort of standard. Where would we find that standard to make it compliant to what?
That would be in the Article 1300 of the zoning ordinance. It states adequate landscaping to enhance and beautify the recreational vehicle park, as well as minimize noise and visual problems shall be provided throughout the park. Compliant and approved landscaping. We've stricken approved through the Putnam County Board of Zoning Appeals special permit, because we changed that. We changed the special permit process via text amendment a few meetings back. So
Mr. Call, is that same requirement also written the same in C1 where this was a approved use, or was this in here due to this being a special use originally?
Are we talking about landscaping?
Yeah, number 6 here, Mr. Pack asked about.
Okay, adequate landscaping, recreation.
Is this same requirement also in the C1?
Yes. Yeah, this is from Article 1700, which covers all the zoning districts.
So do we need to change either number 1 or 17.1 under 5 so that they match up?
Yeah, well, there is a discrepancy there. The O, number 1, simply calls out a recreational vehicle site as 1,000 square feet of pervious land. 17.1, 1,200 square feet, it just says of space. shall be provided for each campsite.
Do we have to make it a part of a principal use of C2, or can it not just be added to something that they have to go to a special permitted use or something? I mean, it seems like it would be a bit much to be putting it as a principal and primary use of a C2 piece, but a RV park in. It's inconsistent.
I mean, it certainly could be added as a special permit
That way
use,
somebody has to look at it.
as opposed to as opposed to, a permitted use. Again, that would be up to, you guys. It's a special permit use in a C1 already. If it's a
That's what I
special
mean.
permit
If
use
it's
in a.
special use in C1, why would we turn around and put it in as a principal and primary use of C2?
C2 is just typically a more liberal zoning district as opposed to a C1. And a lot of things in C1 that are special uses are permitted.
Didn't C2 really reserve for up around the interstate exits? And are we going to have Target beside a RV park? I think we should look at this on a case basis.
Do you know what's driving this being looked at? Because I don't remember.
I'm sorry.
Do you know what is driving us hearing this tonight?
There is an individual who we have talked to, who, there is not an actual application in-house yet, but they want to put they're looking to put a recreational RV park in a C2.
If somebody wanted to put a RV park in C2 and we had stuck it in a special use, would they have to have the full plans and specs and all that before they
Well,
ask for
as
permission?
we changed that in a recent text amendment.
That's what I
The
thought.
special permit use is much simpler now in front of the BZA. Now, the
That's what I
BZA would
thought.
then decide whether that special permit, via a very simple site plan, would be permitted. If it is permitted, then they would have to do a complete commercial submittal with full engineering and everything. But they don't have to do that prior to asking for the special permit, as they used to.
Any additional questions for Mr. Call or staff? Okay. At this point, if there's anybody in the public that would like to issue a comment, please come forward, state your name and address. Let the record indicate no public comment on this. At this point, if nobody else has any questions for staff, I'll close the public hearing at this time. All right, we'll close the public hearing and we can debate this. I don't disagree with Mr. Pack or Mr. Yeager on this, that instead of putting this in as a permitted use, put it in as a special use, especially with the changes that have made it.
It gives them the opportunity to do it, but doesn't force it.
Agreed, and you looked at it on a case-by-case basis, and with the changes that you don't have to provide full engineering documents to have your special use heard, I don't see that as being overly burdensome for somebody. But I'm not a voting member of this board right now, so I guess to be right, we need to go through the facts here. On the worksheet, and that is, will the proposed amendment protect and promote public health, safety, convenience, morals, and general welfare?
It could if adjusted.
Yeah. Yeah, so Mr. Yeager is saying that, yes, if this was adjusted to being a permitted, or excuse me, special use in C2. Is the amendment consistent in achieving the objectives of the adopted comprehensive plan, US 35 corridor management plan, and the Tays Valley land use plan?
I think so. If our objective is to maximize our land use, these RV parks are very popular. Expanding that to C2 and allowing for more options for them to come in with additional oversight, I think.
As a special use permit?
As a special use permit.
Okay. So we've answered question 1 and 2 in the affirmative. we've discussed amending this, that instead of this being a permitted use, that this is actually a special use. If we take a motion to approve this as a special use, not a permitted use.
I would so move, but I would also, as part of that motion, bring the issue on the square footage and to make them match. I would go with the 1,200 square feet, the 1,000 feet requirement up above. Pervious land, that's just another word for accessible. So I think, and since the 1,200 foot requirements in the state legislative rule, I would recommend we go with the 1,200 square feet.
So, Mr. Dodrell's amended the motion to include that. I have a second. Second by Mr. Mays. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Unfinished business. I'm unaware of any unfinished business. Mr. Call?
Okay, we can move on to the monthly report. You'll see on your pads, in May, we had 29 development permits, 8 for site-built homes and 7 for mobile homes, the 28 in total. We had 4 commercial, 8 accessory, and 2 others, so 29 development permits for May. We had 8 zoning permits in May. We didn't have any zoning issue approvals in May. In May, we worked on 9 development plats. We worked on 47 plats so far in 2023. So 9.5 average per month. If you move on to the next sheet, you'll see that so far in 2023, from January till now, we've done 102 development permits and 21 zoning permits. We're actually 4.8% behind last year, but we made a pretty strong comeback in May as opposed to earlier in the year. So hopefully that bodes well for the summer. Relative to the permit status report so far in May, outstanding permits. You'll see the cart mill project that Randolph Engineering is working on, that's still pending. We contacted them. You see in the last column here when our last contact relative to, check on the status of the permits. The Blevins Training Center, we're still waiting on revisions. And the Meeks Reynolds multifamily project, we're still waiting on a redesign from the client. We have, Pastor Green at the Tays Valley Baptist Church has put that on hold due to some budgetary issues. Appalachian Power, that was BZA. Jordan is pending some application from the client. Additional information is required from Pilot Travel Centers relative to some floodplain issues. We're waiting on additional information on this wholesale fireworks. They're have to decide on what their the operational time is. The 2 Crown Castles were approved today. Permit 12881 and 12882. Pulp Juice, they are revising their signage, which also affects their CLU permit. And the Verizon cell tower upgrade, we are waiting on a contractor's license. So the rest of these have been dealt with. Those are the outstanding permits.
Any questions for Mr. Call? All right, Mr. Call.
And real quick, our normally scheduled meeting, it was for June 22nd. We do not have an agenda item for that. So I discussed with Mr. Asbury prior to this meeting, we would suggest that we forego the June 22nd meeting. And on our July 18th meeting, we'll have a few more text amendments, and we'll be talking about the Jordan Place major subdivision preliminary plat approval.
Sounds good, and I appreciate everybody coming out tonight for a special meeting. I know it's hard in the summertime, but to call a special meeting, everybody shows up, so greatly appreciate it from my seat, so thank you guys and gals. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's cold out there. I had to get Jessica put him some pants on her motorcycle.
Yeah, you didn't be here all night.
I saw it.
I've watched all that Corvette had the double clutch automatic, which I'm sure.